Hello, my name is Scott, and welcome to my channel, Low Altitude Flyer. Today we'll take a quick look into how the throttle and clutch are used for slow speed motorcycle riding. There's a link in the descriptions to the full slow speed technique video, so let's get started. Runway 6 clear for takeoff, first enter. So now just a little bit more details on the throttle and the clutch. So remember, there's only two reasons why your bike is going to fall at slow speeds, right? One's related to the throttle and one's related to the clutch. The throttle, we're going to do one setting. We're going to set it at 1 RPM, and there's nothing else that we need to do with the throttle. All slow speed turns, the serpentine, the figure eights, the U-turns, all of it, we have one setting for the throttle. So what RPM are we going to set it to? Well, looking at all the research that I did, and on also on Robert Simmons, he does about 2,000 RPMs for the Harleys, because they idle around 950 RPMs. What I found is, for the most part, is everywhere it says to double your idle RPM, and it seems to work out. So out of the Honda dirt bike, idles around 750. On that, about 1500, 1700 worked fine. Harleys and Indians and those bikes, they seem to, they idle right around that 950. So the 2000 mark seems to work really well for them. My BMW, on the other hand, idles around 1250. If I go to 2000, it still isn't happy. So it likes to go to right around that 2500 mark. And so that's what I try to set it at. But whatever bike you have, you just need to find that setting that works for your bike. Mine has to be about 24 or 2500. Harley's around that 2000. Other bikes would be slightly different. You just figure that out, what that is. But that's the one setting. Everything we do will have that one setting. So we need to practice that. We need to go out and practice that. And it sounds simple enough, right? But watching all these practice sessions, watching other people try to do slow speed maneuvers, it's amazing. They're trying to do U-turns and they're still struggling with the throttle position. So we set it and forget it. Robert Simmons brings it up in his term is preload. Get it preloaded, and then keep it there. And you're going to keep it there for all of slow speed environment. So it seems simple. So how are we going to practice that? Well, one, we're going to listen for it, but you have to remember we're just not standing or sitting on the bike static. We're going to be moving from clock to clock on the steering. So, or if you have tall handlebars, for instance, or you're shorter like me and you have to reach out for it, you have to be able to practice that. It's a skill to be able to maintain the same throttle no matter where you're at. No matter where you're at, you need to maintain that same throttle. So it takes practice. So that's the first thing. Remember, this is one of the reasons why the bike falls. Don't go on to the next skills until you can master maintaining that throttle, because you're just going to get frustrated. You're just going to dump your bike because the bike is going to stall. Okay? So this is very important. Now, the other reason why our bike is going to fall at slow speeds is the clutch. Pulling in the clutch specifically when it's not appropriate. So we need to change the mindset, because right now we get unstable. Our instinct is to pull the clutch in and put our feet down and stop the bike from falling. We need to change that mentality. We need to increase the clutch when the bike feels like it's going to fall. remember, we just need to keep sufficient power to the rear wheel. So if the bike is falling, that means we don't have sufficient power. We need to increase the clutch. We'll be doing a few lessons where the primary purpose of the lesson is to convince our brains to trust that message, that we need to increase clutch to stop the bike from falling. Let's talk a little bit about that clutch. So one thing that Robert Simmons did is he made up this linear way of looking at the different stages of the clutch. He calls it the 5 stages of the friction zone. And it's just a brilliant way to look at it. So it just gives us a way that we can identify the different sections. So we can, when we say stage 2, everyone knows exactly what we're talking about. So let's talk about the clutch a little bit. So we all know there are different type of clutches. You might have a hydraulic clutch. You might have a cable-driven clutch. Where they engage, every bike is going to be a little bit different. So that's one of the first things you need to do when you hop on your new bike, or you hop on a different bike, is just figure out where that engagement starts. How far it engages, it does change a little bit in different bikes. The BMW I have actually has a larger area that for the friction zone than what I'm used to, so that took a little bit of time, or it takes a little bit of time to get used to. You just need to figure out what that is, and it's usually about at 1/2 inch. I did some research. It looks like from about 3, and this is the throw of the clutch. It's from about 3/8 of an inch to 3/4 of an inch, but generally about 1/2 inch. So from the grip to the point where it first starts engaging, Robert calls that 0. So there's no engagement of the clutch. Okay, where that starts is going to be different in every bike. So we just need to figure out where that's at. But as soon as the bike starts to move, that's stage 1. Okay. So we move it another 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch. We're going to enter what's called stage 2, and that's when the bike is going to stand up and the handlebars are going to straighten out. And it's a very obvious thing that happens when you do it. So when we go out and practice, we're going to find that, right? The very first thing we're going to do is work with that clutch. We're going to be working in the clutch only, no brake. So we're going to have the throttle set, and we're going to be just working the clutch. So we're going to get to the 0, we're going to figure out where 1 is, and then that'll get the bike moving, but we'll also figure out where the bike stands up, and that's stage 2. And that's where we're living. We're going to live in stage 1 and 2. Stage 3 and 4 are just more engagement and more engagement, but it gets too much engagement to be able to do the slow speed riding. The only time you'd go up into those while we're still in the slow speed is if we needed to get the bike to stand up. Like we're in 2, the bike was leaned a little bit too far and it's still falling, we might engage a little bit more, 2.5 or 3 to get the bike to stand up. But we wouldn't want to stay there. We'd go right back to 1 or 2 because it's just too much friction for the rear brake. We'd be fighting the rear brake. So, and there's techniques to figure out where we're at. So when we're out riding, we'll show how you know if you're in a 1 or a 2 or if you're in a 3, and we'd want to bring it back to 2. And then 5 is full engagement, okay? And then the rest of the clutch throw is just full engagement. So again, from the handle, it's 0, up to the point, or the grip, so up to the point where the bike starts to move, that's all 0, there's no engagement. We get into 1, that is the bike starts to move. We're going to engage a little bit more, that's 2, that's when the bike stands up and the handlebars straighten out. And that's the magic spot. We want to stay in that 2. So we need to find it, we need to learn where that's at. We'll also can hear the difference in the engine when you start engaging the clutch. So that's another thing we can listen for. And the RPMs will actually drop slightly when you're engaging the clutch. So that's something else we can identify to know that we're in that friction zone. So we've talked about the different stages of the friction zone, and that we want to live in the 1 and 2 stage of friction zone, not 3 and 4. So when we go out, we'll demonstrate how to tell if you're are engaged too much. But real quick, basically what it is if you're in the friction zone and you have the brake engaged, controlling that speed, and you say you slow it down to 3 or 4 miles an hour, if you lift the rear brake and the bike just slowly accelerates, but not that jerky acceleration, you're in a 2. Okay, you're in that 1 or 2. If you lift up the brake and the bike lunges, that means your brake was fighting the clutch too much. So you're probably in a 3 or 4. Okay, so we simply bring it in a little bit. Just do that brake lever and release it, and make sure it's just a nice smooth acceleration. And that's how we're going to tell it what stage of the friction zone we're in.